In this episode, I am talking to Dr. David Whelan, a professor in astronomy and physics. Dr. Whelan is a faithful Catholic convert and is also a scientist. So our discussion mainly centers around the intersection between faith and reason. And this has been a popular topic on social media recently, but I think Dr. Whelan offers some insight that is nuanced and helpful to all listeners, whether or not you are a scientist or a layman in both Catholic faith and in scientific literature. He is a breadth of wisdom. In the show notes, I have links to his website as well as a link that he is wanting to share with us, which is of Catholic Scientists. So they're a cool organization that he approves of, and I will be adding that link into the show notes. Additionally, I asked that one of the free ways that you can support me is that you just follow this page and follow my Instagram at Words with Ward Show. That means more than you know, and it'll help me grow this podcast so I can continue pushing these out. I also have some very cool news coming out that I'll be putting on my Instagram and perhaps in later episodes of this podcast. So you'll be wanting to follow that for the 2026 new year. This is the Words with Ward Show. I'm your host, Tyler Ward. David Whelan, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here, Tyler. Good to see you.
It's good to see you again. Just for a little bit of background, you're a professor at Austin College, which I attended, and I was part of the Catholic Student Association, which you kind of look over, and that's how we met. But your day job is a professor in astronomy, correct?
Physics department, but
Physics
yes,
department.
I also teach astronomy classes and use the telescope.
Very cool. So before we get all started in that, would you mind leading us in prayer or have any ideas with that?
I'd be happy to, and it's going to be Psalm number 8.
Psalm number 8.
So in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name through all the earth. Your majesty is set above the heavens. From the mouths of children and of babes you fashioned praise to foil your enemy, to silence the foe and the rebel. When I see the heavens, the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you arranged, what is man that you should keep him in mind, the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you have made him little lower than the angels. With glory and honor you crowned him, gave him power over the works of your hands. You put all things under his feet, all of them, sheep and oxen, yes, even the cattle of the fields, birds of the air and fish of the sea, that make their ways through the waters. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name through all the earth. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
It's a beautiful and fitting prayer for today's discussion.
I thought so. And one of my favorites, there's several psalms that really speak to me and several prayers in the Bible that speak to the majesty of God's creation. And since that's what I study, an astronomer, they obviously draw me.
Absolutely. So why don't we get into that a little bit and perhaps explain, at least in layman's terms, what astronomy is? Because I think for maybe a wide variety of the audience, they might be thinking something closer to like astrology or something of that nature.
It has happened many times that people ask me what I do, and if I say astronomy, they say, oh, I love astrology and numerology and all that stuff. And so I do have to be cautious. Astronomy is the study of space, stars specifically, but also galaxies, the things that are in between the stars. And I use the Adams Observatory here at Austin College in order to study stars that are many times bigger than the sun, because they have a lot of mysterious properties that we don't yet understand. So whatever the physics are that are driving their mechanisms, we don't yet have a great handle on that. And my goal is to try to put some of those pieces together.
That's awesome. And what would be the difference kind of between your studies, which are scientific based, versus kind of the pseudoscientific astrology?
So I was curious by when you said pseudo-scientific astrology, because I saw that in the notes as well when we were when you sent those to me, and I'm not really familiar with the term, so I'm wondering if you can tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, and actually that was given to me by another professor who used to be at Austin College, who was my first year seminar instructor. But it's kind of this idea of something trying to act as though it is science or answer questions that science is supposed to answer, but take more of a, I guess, and this will get into our discussion today, but take more of a spiritual based approach. So there's this idea, at least what we discussed in the first year seminar, was that faith has a way of answering questions and certain questions that it attempts to answer, where science has a way of answering questions with a specific goal in mind of what it wants to answer.
That's right.
And a lot of pseudoscience or fake sciences try to attempt to answer things that they're not qualified to answer.
Yeah, I think the problem with astrology in that way is you expect the stars to be able to tell you your future or even your present, and two people born at exactly the same time can lead completely different lives. So the positions of the stars at their birth doesn't seem to have very much of an effect on them.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to be careful between wanting things to be explainable and the reality, which is sometimes that you just have to live your life and see how things go.
Okay.
I do see, I'm actually familiar with a whole astrology club. In fact, I invited them to the observatory so that they could experience some real astronomy. And this was obviously with malice aforethought. I really wanted them to maybe question whether or not they knew what they were doing. And what struck me in conversation with them is the number of times that they really wanted to have faith in the idea that there was some grand pattern out there that they could see. They really wanted to have control over that foreseeable pattern. And so I think in that way, it makes really interesting, maybe it's more interesting psychology than it is astronomy, to be honest with you, because it says a lot about these people's, comfort level, where they see themselves in society, and how they want to exert control over their own fortune.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As someone who's kind of going down that path and in school for it right now,
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of had that natural lean towards psychological discussions, even with close friends. They tend to go into depth before they even like have any surface level. And I
Mm.
had many discussions with people like when we're out on like the lake campus or something like that, where the stars are a lot more visible at night than it would
Mm.
be simply just in the city. And those tend to lead towards conversations. I had individuals ask me if I believed in miracles, and I knew that was likely in reference to them looking up at the stars,
Mm.
vastness, why we need scripture, why we need God, things of that nature.
Mm.
So I definitely do think there is something that speaks to us with the heavens or the celestials in a way. But I take it you didn't get into astronomy in order to talk about astrology. So what exactly made you pick this field, and how'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start back in high school. Um, in high school, my parents expected that I go to college, and I was toying with the idea of the military. Had recruiters come by the house and spoke with people. Um, but in the end, it was going to be college, and that was fine. And I was looking for a college major, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had taken AP science classes, and I was picking colleges specifically that where I could pursue my science education, but I really also wanted to do music. So I'm a
Mm.
cellist. This was another part of my education that my parents insisted upon from a young age. And so I grew up playing the cello, and I grew up singing in the church choir. And those experiences really stayed with me. Music ended up meaning a lot to me. And in fact, some of my fondest memories of growing up in church were singing, and altar serving. And those are the things that still stick with me today, the things that really matter to me, the hymns that I still remember and sing to myself, and so forth.
Yeah.
Um, and so I knew that music was going to be a part of my life. And so I wanted to choose a place to go to college where I could do both. The way that Ithaca College, which is where I graduated with my bachelor's degree, did things is that I applied to the College of Humanities and Sciences for admittance. I also applied for a music minor through the music school, and I was admitted to both. And then they sent a form home the summer before I started college, and on the form was essentially all the majors that were possible in the humanities and sciences, and they said pick one. And I was completely unprepared for this, and so I looked at the form, and I looked straight at the sciences, and there was biology, chemistry, physics. And I said, well, I tested best in biology when I took AP Bio. I tested better in AP Bio, I felt, than AP Physics. And so I thought, well, why not just go with a biology major? So I clicked biology major and sent the form back to college. I got to college, and I don't remember if it was the chemistry or the biology lab. It conflicted with symphony rehearsals,
Oh.
the symphony orchestra on campus. And I'd already tried out for the symphony and was admitted to that. And so I said, well, I'm going to choose the music over biology because I'm not really married to the idea of
Yeah.
pursuing biology. And so I got rid of my bio major. I dropped biology. I dropped chemistry. I took 2 additional courses, one of which was actually really excellent in the end. But at that point, I was an undecided major, which was probably a box which was available to me when the form went home, but I just never noticed it.
Mm.
And so very quickly, within the first week of school, I went from a biology to an undeclared major.
Wow.
And then at the end of the year, I decided that maybe music was the thing that I really cared most about. So I applied for a music major, and they accepted me.
Wow.
My sophomore year, I was a music major, and I had to take a science class for my breadth requirement. And so I took a class called Stars, Galaxies, and the Universe. And because I thought astronomy would be cool, I used to
What
do
year was this again?
What year was that? This was my sophomore year of college.
Sophomore year? Okay.
Yeah. And so a year of college has passed. I'm in my second year when I am taking an astronomy class, but I'm a music major.
Okay.
If this is too many details, Tyler,
No, no, this is perfect.
okay, you know best. So there I am, a music major and taking an astronomy class. And actually, the 2 classes that I loved the best that fall semester were my music history class and my astronomy class. And then partway through the semester, I got injured, and I couldn't play the cello for several weeks. And before that, even though, if I'm really honest, I was quite bored sitting in a practice room for hours a day, and it really was hours and hours a day. I felt like I wasn't using portions of my brain. It was this weird feeling where I felt like one portion of my brain was really hot and on all the time, but there was this like vast majority of my brain that was just like ready to burst out of my skull. It was so bored with what it was doing or not doing.
Oh, wow.
And so the history class, the music history class, and the astronomy class, those were feeding that area of my brain that felt so unused. And so injuring myself was a real moment. I had no idea what to do at that point. Absolutely no idea. So I put all of my effort into these 2 more academic classes. At the end of the semester, so this was December of that year, my sophomore year, I was taking the final exam for my astronomy class, and I approached my professor at the end of the exam, and I turned it into her, and I said, "Thank you for a great semester. This class was just wonderful." And she said to me, "What's your major?" And I said, "Well, I'm a music major." And it turns out that she's a dancer, and she also sings in choir. And so she had an understanding for the interplay between a scientific mindset and a love for music.
Yeah.
And so she immediately understood. And she said, "Well, have you ever considered a physics major?" And, I had never considered anything of the kind. I'd done fine in physics in high school, but I really hadn't liked my physics teacher very much, and so it had never occurred to me that I could, pursue that
Yeah.
with any interest. And so I said, "Well, no, I've never considered that. Let me think about it." And she said, "Okay." I learned after the fact that she never really expected me to come back. But I went to the sort of, coffee shop on campus with my girlfriend, who's now my wife.
Oh, wow.
And we spoke about it for a couple of hours. I was, weighing the pros and cons and thinking about what would it mean, second semester sophomore to suddenly switch majors like that. What else would I have to do? Is this even plausible? And what would my future look like? But what was nice about the thought is that for the first time since entering college, I felt like I had the possibility of a direction.
Yeah.
It gave me hope, right? Like,
Yes.
what am I doing here otherwise? So I really glommed onto the idea. And after those 2 or 3 hours, however long it was, I said, "Well, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go see if she's in her office." So I went, and she was grading our final exams. And I said, "Hey, I would really like to become a physics major. Push comes to shove. But I really want to do astronomy. Can you help me do that?" And she was, "Yes, let me talk to the department, make sure we can figure this out. Can you send me how many classes you've taken so we can figure out what you have to take left?" So all this stuff starts happening.
Wow.
I have to take a math exam in order to test into the correct calculus class because I haven't done that yet. And then I can't even start the curriculum until the next fall because of the class rotation.
Yeah.
And so there's some classes I should probably take over the summer in order to. So all these details get worked out, and between the summer classes and then the next 2 years, I graduate on time somehow.
Wow.
But I can credit that professor with opening up my mind to the idea of considering something that I hadn't yet considered. And that set me on the path to where I am today, which I think answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of cool things that you mentioned there. First, just and God bless that teacher and all the teachers that make impacts into people's lives like that. I know I have a few in the back of my head that I can thank for setting me on those courses. I kind of want to talk a little bit, and I know we didn't plan on doing it, so no pressure on like trying to find any connection, but I do find the connection with music to be I don't know. I think there's a tendency to sometimes, in hopes of striking some wisdom, to try to compare two seemingly unrelated things like music and science together, and perhaps they don't relate. But I feel like there's something about them because I've seen so many people that are scientists or are on that path that are also great musicians, and I was wondering if that's just because they are so vastly different and they are trying to work both sides of their brain, or if there's something kind of connected between the two.
I'll give you some examples.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard of Johannes Kepler, maybe? He was the one who devised. They're called Kepler's 3 laws of motion. He was the one who was able to figure out that the planets move in ellipses, not circles. And this was 400 years ago. But before he arrived at those answers, he also wrote a book called On the Harmony of the Heavenly Spheres. And he tried to connect the motions of the planets with musical harmony. The idea he had in his mind was that since the heavens are at that time, what we would consider the physical space, they saw as heaven. Since heaven is the realm of God, it must be perfect. And therefore, if you could hear the planets in motion, they must be singing. And of course, they must be singing harmoniously. So we should be able to attribute tones to the motions of the planets and hear their harmonies if we play it.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
fascinating.
right. And so there's a math mind and there's a music mind, just, finding it together. Another example, a book on harmony, was also written by the famous astronomer James Jeans at the beginning of the 20th century. That professor whom I mentioned to you, my first astronomy professor, her father was a math major, a math professor, in fact, who composed music for piano on the side for the fun of it.
Wow.
There is a way to think of music which is as pattern, but the harmonies also create layers of just simple mathematical formulae, essentially ratios.
Yeah.
And so if you look at music in that way, or if that pleases you to look at music in that way, then it's very easy to see how the mindset of a scientist or a mathematician is very similar to the modes in which music can be expressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say
I
that there's not very much of a difference between the two. I would say there's actually a great deal of similarity. It comes naturally to me. And it comes naturally, the reason I told you these two examples, it comes naturally to a host of people. It's not just me.
yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, I'm not going to articulate it as well. I have many years to get there, but even from like a soft science, like psychological standpoint, both kind of appeal to me in the way of um, they elevate the passions to like trying to reach the highest or the highest truth. And we'll get into that conversation of like science revealing truth, and if all truth comes from God, then it likely might be in line with that. But I like going into mass, for example, or going to a Latin mass in specific, where it's this kind of angelic chant where it does kind of lift the spirits in order to worship. And I think good science, good music, good worship, it all kind of does that. And it reminds me like St. Thomas Aquinas talking about having those passions in line with the intellect and the will. So you're an astronomer, but you're also heavily involved in the CSA as like kind of sponsor there. So we know you're Catholic. That's why you're also on the podcast. So what did that formation kind of look like for you?
So I was raised in the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
I'm a convert.
Very cool.
Yeah. And
some of our best Catholics are.
Well, God willing. Yeah. So I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and I loved the church growing up. I really did. My parish priest really had a focus on music, which is where the choir experiences came from. But when I wasn't singing, I dearly wanted to serve. And so being on the altar was something that I did quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
And being able to serve in those ways, being able to share my faith in such an obvious way was something that had it was such a gut level understanding for me. I never had to express it in words. This was just who I was. This is what I did. This is the way I expressed my love for God from an early age. Confirmation at the age of 13 was a meaningful experience to me. Not least because my confirmation, what do you call it? Your, not advisor. What do you call the person?
Oh, your sponsor?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what it is. My confirmation sponsor. Not least because my confirmation sponsor was a physicist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I actually not thought of the fact that that's a connection. But he was a good family friend. And when I was confirmed, he gave me a little gift, which was C.S. Lewis's A Case for Christianity.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And on the inside cover, he wrote, David, you're making a bold move.
Wow.
And at the time, I was like, why? It's just so natural to me. And it wasn't until I started my career as a scientist and I saw how many atheists there were that I understood what Ian was telling me. It is bold. Because you live in a world that doesn't often want to hear about your faith. And as you know, there's a lot of people who want to make artificial separations between a person's faith and their God-given ability to look at things scientifically. I make no such distinction at all because that's my life, but I do understand that a lot of people from the outside do. And so he was right. Being a Christian and deciding to eventually be a scientist, which he couldn't have known at the time, I suppose, it is a bold move.
Yeah. I think even for those listening that like aren't in the STEM fields or anything like that, being a Christian is a bold move because it's not an easy life. And I hear it a lot with like the prosperity gospels being preached of like following Christ means you're going to like obtain all this good wealth or things of that nature. But Jesus never promised an easy life. Pick up your cross.
Yeah. And how many saints' lives can we point out where that was clearly not the case, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Pretty much every martyred saint in the church, the apostles, Yeah, not an easy life to be a Christian, but
Mhm.
a worthwhile life to live for sure.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
so you got confirmed as an Episcopalian,
hmm
and then when did you become Catholic?
Yeah. There's a long period between those two things.
Okay.
And this might be touching on sensitive topics, but I think it's worthwhile sharing.
Okay.
And so, if in the final edit you want to cut something out, I'll completely understand. But college was difficult that first year for me, as I've already described, mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
hmm
And I stopped going to services on Sunday. But mostly it was because there was no strictly Episcopal service on campus. There was a Catholic service, there was a Catholic Mass, so they brought a priest from the local parish. And there was a Protestant, just everybody come thing.
hmm
I'd been to Catholic Mass with a friend before, and so it was practically identical to what I knew. I understood that, but I wasn't Catholic, and so I couldn't partake in the Eucharist, and so there was that. And then the Protestant one was just so generic, but also non-liturgical that it really didn't suit me at all, and so I just stopped going to the Sunday service at all.
Mm.
And then, of course, I found my direction with astronomy, and I think it was only natural at that point, once I found my sort of my direction in college, that I began to question my faith.
Mm.
It was sort of the typical questions that you would expect a student in physics and astronomy to begin to ask, like, clearly the Bible says that the Earth was created in 7 days. Clearly we have very good evidence, and I was learning just how good the evidence was, that the Earth is much, much older than that, so what does that mean?
hmm
I am principally, however, a man of faith, and so by asking these questions, I was really doing battle against myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my faith wasn't letting me have it that easy.
Mm.
And so I kept on rounding in a very unscientific way, is trying to justify my faith by saying, oh, but it could be this. Oh, but it could be this.
Yeah.
It was years, I think, before I realized that any argument based on physical reality alone for the existence of God was impossible, which is, of course, now a sort of well-known thing.
Mm.
But I began to, frame things very differently for myself in order to continue to support my faith.
Yeah.
This time was a time of growth, though, in spite of my stepping away from services. Except on vacations when I could go home and everything would feel comfortable again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my good friends many of my good friends in college were Catholic. I didn't put the pieces together until later. But two of my Catholic friends became Catholic seminarians.
Oh, wow.
One of them right after college and one of them later. And the one who left right out of college to become a seminarian, I hadn't seen it coming, but he and I stayed in contact.
Mm.
And so I was in college at the time when this was another really big sore point for me, in terms of not specifically my faith in God, but Episcopalianism specifically. This was the time, it was during my sophomore, maybe beginning of my junior year of college. A divorced gay man was elected bishop of a diocese in the Episcopal Church.
Mm.
And I had read the Gospels and had read how vehemently Jesus was opposed to divorce specifically.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd also read St. Paul's letters and how he, spoke against homosexuality.
Mm.
That didn't concern me too much because I knew you could be homosexual and a good person. And I figured if God makes people some certain way, then it can't be all bad, right? And so the man's sexuality didn't bother me. It really did bother me, the fact that it was so open.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't talk about my own bedroom life that way. Why should other people? But I've
Specifically
grown in
bishop,
argument.
yeah.
I understand where this stuff is coming from in a sense, in a way that I didn't when I was, 20.
Mm.
But I had a real problem with the fact that this man was divorced and had had children before he
Oh,
found a gay partner and then married this person. And that was all being sort of said. It was just widely being said that's not a problem by the Episcopal Church. He can still be a bishop of a flock. But I thought to myself, what kind of tone is that setting for his flock?
yeah.
What kind of example is that setting? My own parish priest growing up was a dedicated family man, and never divorced, children that I grew up with, and that was the example that I knew. And so this was such a counterexample that I really struggled with this.
Yeah.
And at the time, the Episcopal Church was really actively talking about splitting and falling apart over this issue. And there were numerous parishes across the country that did leave. You might be familiar with the fact that some of them became Catholic.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And those still exist. Like St. Rita's Community, I think in Dallas is one of those that used to be Episcopalian. And so this was all going on while I'm in college, and I'm also struggling with my faith because of the things that I'm learning about the universe, and they don't seem to line up with the Bible. And so there's all these things going on at once. I graduate, and these questions haven't gone away, and I haven't really explored denominations of Christianity outside of Episcopalianism yet. But I begin to have a conversation with my old college friend who's now a seminarian. And one of the things that comes up is the fact that, in the Episcopal Church, we say the Apostles' Creed too. And we say we believe in one holy Catholic and apostolic church. And so there's a universalism that we adopt, even as Episcopalians, even though there's this rift apparently between us. And so I said something that was really, really naive. I said, I don't understand why we're called Protestants. I mean, what are we protesting against? I really had no idea about the politics of the time.
Yeah.
And my friend said something to me, this seminarian, that's always stuck with me, but has struck me as a great deal wiser than I was at the moment, now that I can see it with the passage of time. He said to me, with an attitude like that, you should be Catholic. And a funny thing happened when he said that to me, which I could not have foreseen. I love my Catholic friends. I always had loved my Catholic friends. But for the very first time, my heckles went up. There was something about the implication that I should become Catholic, but he shouldn't worry about being Episcopalian that really set me off.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize I was carrying that hubris around. I didn't realize I was carrying that sort of pride of place. I really loved my parish growing up. I really loved the music. I loved the Episcopal liturgy, which is obviously derived from Catholic liturgy and practically is the same thing. And what he was saying to me, without actually saying it, was, give up everything that you know and come to my side. And I'd never seen it that way, and it really bothered me.
Yeah.
And years pass, and I go to graduate school, and a couple things in between there. But I'm still a man of faith, and I'm actually becoming, I think, when I get to graduate school, a little bit more confident in my faith again, but also still really upset about, all the things that I don't understand about Episcopalianism, but also why churches aren't more connected. Why are we dividing Christ's body in this way? That still really bothered me a lot. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it and trying to reason why it was that maybe the Episcopal Church was correct and others were wrong, which of course couldn't be completely, right? Or why can't we all just get along, which is a really stupid thought, but also really an honest one, right? If you just want to just live your life.
Yeah.
And my friend from seminary begins to try to, press the point a little, because we're still talking. We're still writing letters to one another. And he's pressing the point, why don't you become Catholic?
Yeah.
I think he saw a lot of similitude between the two of us. But I think he saw something more than that. I think he saw someone who was still searching and still trying to figure it out. I was so pissed at him by trying to do that. I feel bad about that now. And I apologize to him about this, because I shut him out. I was like, no way. I'm not going to change for you. No, the world has to change for me. It was, we have to look at this differently as a whole world, and everybody has to become more ecumenical, and we have to become better about this. And I start learning a little bit about church history, just a little bit. Get through graduate school. I'm looking for jobs. I do take a job in Virginia before coming here to Austin College. But by the time I get here, my wife and I were still technically Episcopalian, and we're still trying to figure out what to, do. We have a young child at that point. She's about to be, or she was baptized by that point again in the Episcopal Church. We go to the Episcopal Church here in town, and neither of us feel at home. Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to soldier through it, but my wife Leslie is really not happy, and she's like, I really don't want to go back to that place. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, what do I do? And so we think about it, and we're like, well, we have really good Lutheran friends. Some of my best friends from growing up are Lutherans. And so we say, well, there's this Lutheran church that we pass by, like every day when we're driving back and forth to work. Why don't we just try that? And so we go to Trinity Lutheran here in town. The pastor at the time was Pastor Craig Sturm, great guy. And for many years, we stayed in the Lutheran church. But this is an important part of my formation because as we're going to services at the Lutheran church over the course of years, and we were there for long enough to be able to see the whole liturgy over the course of years and see it repeated, mm-hmm. There were portions of the Bible that were being completely left out of Sunday readings.
Yeah.
And portions that I didn't expect because we used them in the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal, when the Anglican Communion came about, when the Church of England separated itself from the Catholic Church, it didn't change the Bible in the way that Luther did. Mm-hmm. And so it still had all the pieces of the puzzle that Catholics are used to. And so I was unfamiliar with the idea that, some Bibles had fewer books than others. Yeah. That was news to me. And maybe I should have known, but anyway, I learned this in my 30s. And then I became very interested in Luther as a person. Like, how did this happen, right? And why are we not reading certain things? And then I learned about his opinions about certain books in the Bible and why they were excised. And I began putting together some of the early history of the church. And I couldn't believe that one person decided that whole councils who had put together the Bible as we know it were wrong and that he was right. And it I guess in a certain way, it also humbled me because that's sort of the way I'd been thinking about my Episcopalianism, mm-hmm. Very pride-based, very hubris, like I know the answer. Why doesn't everybody just do what I do? And it forced me to think about what's going on. Like, obviously, there's something that's not working.
Yeah.
And so Leslie and I are having discussions about this. And I'm always grateful to have Leslie in my life because she comes at things from such a different perspective than I do. We were talking about the Eucharist, and we were talking about the way that it's done in the Lutheran Church. This was towards the tail end of our time there. And the thing that had struck me was the fact that we were using leavened bread.
Yes.
And it was the Passover meal, so I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I don't understand something else. And she said, I don't understand how the pastor can say what Jesus said, which is, this is my body, which is given for you. But then after service, anything that's left over, they give it to the children to go give to the birds. Mm. And I'd seen them do this. I just sort of accepted it. I hadn't really thought much about it, but I was struck.
Yeah.
Because that's not very respectful, is it?
No. I kind of winced a little bit when you said it. And I know that like our sacraments are like the Catholic sacraments are the valid ones. It made me wince a little bit. I imagined doing that within the context of the Catholic Church and just, it would never happen, but that's just, yeah, wow.
I think the difference is obviously between whether you believe that this is the true presence of Jesus or not. Mm-hmm. And that forced me to come to grips with that point of view and to think about it. And that plus certain arguments that were being made at the pulpit on a sort of regular basis that Leslie and I would come home and talk about and really were dissatisfied with, mm-hmm. it became a crisis. The Episcopal Church has made so many wrong choices from our point of view, and it started for me back in college, but it hadn't stopped.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that they're all bad. And in fact, I would definitely say that they are not. Right? So you have to look at this from a nuanced point of view. Not everybody is good, not everybody is bad. At the same time, this is happening. I'm also learning about, and this was huge news, the sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church, right? Which had been going on for a long time and was propagated sometimes by the highest levels in the church and allowed to continue at the expense of human beings in a very harmful way. Mm-hmm. And so looking at the grand sum total of things, it was obvious to me that there was no one person who was doing this right, no one denomination who had the goods on like doing it right all of the time. People were failing constantly. But I couldn't take Lutheranism at face value anymore.
Mhm.
I had learned too much about stuff that didn't sit well with me and didn't sit well with Scripture, just as with the Episcopal Church. And so this was a long night conversation with my wife, and we're trying to, she's allowing me to talk this through. She's very uncomfortable with the idea of the Catholic Church for her own reasons. And I just say to her, Leslie, I think I just have to go to a Catholic service in order to know whether or not this is really the right path to pursue. I just have to know.
Mhm.
And I'm in my 30s now. This conversation, my heckle's getting up, started when I was 21, 22.
Mhm.
And so this has been a long journey of me essentially getting over myself over time and trying to figure this out. And she agreed that it was okay for me to go to Catholic service. She would go to the Trinity Lutheran with the kids that Sunday. I would go to St. Mary's here in Sherman.
Mhm.
I walked in. I approached an usher. I said, I'm new here. I want to know what to do. He taught me how to hold my hands up for the Eucharist, but I could go up for a blessing. He invited me to sit in the back so that I could witness everything. The ushers would be near there, so if I had any more questions, I could ask him. It was very polite. The priest approached me. I shook hands with him. He was very kind. And I watched the service. It had all of the pieces that I was familiar with from my Episcopal upbringing, so it felt almost identical. There were some small word changes,
Mhm.
which was the Catholic Church trying to stay, current with the way that people, say things now, right?
Yeah.
And I walked away knowing that this was my future.
Mhm. After one mass.
There was no question in my mind.
Wow.
There
Wow.
was absolutely no question. And so I pretty much, I said, I'm going to do this. How do I get started?
Yeah.
And the usher was very kind and taught me some things. And then I went home and I told Leslie, my wife, I'm going to become Catholic.
Yeah.
And she was quite a bit more cautious about this. She didn't feel, obviously, what I'd felt.
Mhm.
But we began to talk about it. It opened up the door for a conversation, a long-term conversation to start taking place. It also
Yeah.
opened the door for me to start learning about what it was that I was about to do.
Yeah.
And so, there was something about that mass. There was something about me being there. There was something that was tugging at me that I knew immediately this was the right solution.
Mhm.
It's always been interesting to me, and ever since, this is the way that I sort of describe myself as a convert. My very first mass was on Mother's Day of 2019 at St. Mary's Parish,
Yeah.
at St. Anne's Church, which is Mary's mom.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. And it was Mother's Day.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I have now learned to really, I've been falling in love with our Blessed Mother ever since. It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
kind of devotion that's sort of, in the Anglican communion, you can have a devotion to, the Blessed Mother and nobody will think twice about it, but it's not really widely talked about.
Yeah.
And it certainly was not a topic for conversation in Lutheran Church, at least never one that I'd ever had with any
Mhm.
Lutherans. And so it was definitely a learning curve. I'll put it that way. Some people call it a stumbling block. It wasn't a stumbling block for me. It was a learning curve. I just had to, what is this?
Yeah.
And what does it mean? And I still had lots of questions. There were lots of things to learn. There was lots to do. But that was the beginning of my time with the Catholic faith.
Wow. That little Mother Days point that's beautiful. And I mean, I can just reflect on all the times in the gospel and in our devotions too as Catholics where Mary is just pointing towards Jesus. I reflect on like iconography where all the saints, they have their hands, especially like Joseph and Mary who are typically holding an infant Jesus, their hands are pointing towards Christ, and they're
Mm-hmm.
angled in such a way where in the church it leads towards the crucifix and all that. So the fact that in some small part Mary kind of led you home is beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So it sounds as though you kind of took a historical academic approach to the faith, which doesn't surprise me fully, and that's kind of something I want to get into a little bit, and that is the intersection between science and faith. I reading Vatican I and a little bit in the Vatican II, a lot of the documents kind of talk on how reason or science in a way is able to reveal some of the truths of God and that it's not contradictory. In many ways, they're trying to highlight the fact that faith is supra-rational and not infra-rational. So faith is the things that we don't just have faith in the things that we have yet to discover in science, but they're rather that of science. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, you long career as a scientist, as an astronomer, as a physicist. Do you find that you approach science and faith in the same way? Has that shifted? What does that kind of look like for you?
I think it's true that people who have an analytical mindset, like I do, are often drawn to the physical sciences and probably the social sciences too, right? Because you've got whatever the situation is, you are thinking about its parts and how the parts lead to the sum of the whole. Mm-hmm. And so it's not unusual for people who are analytical minded to be drawn to the sciences. I think we do ourselves a disservice as a culture to personify science. Science told me this. I learned from science.
Interesting. Yeah.
This is what science says. Those are all really wrong ways of approaching the basic idea of the sciences for a couple of reasons. One, you've personified it, like I just said, perhaps deified it, right? It cannot do any wrong. It can't be wrong.
Yeah.
Which, how many claims like that have been absolutely wrong over the years, right?
Yeah.
Just think of eugenics.
Yeah.
You have a perfect example of a so-called scientific, and it was very rationally, distributed, very methodical way of looking at things, but it was also cruel and wrong.
Well, I'm thinking from psychology. I mean, we're in a replication crisis currently where we're not able to replicate many of the studies that were being produced in the early 20th century, 21st century. So
almost like they had the idea that they wanted to prove.
Yeah.
And they set that up as their idol before they started.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the better way to look at science is that, well, I think it helps to look at the root word, the Latin word that science is derived from is scientia, which means knowledge. And so, in my opinion, the best way to look at the idea of the sciences is it's the pursuit of knowledge. And it's usually, it has to be a methodical approach to these things. And it has to be in a way that therefore is repeatable, right? You just talked about that crisis in psychology. Yeah. So it has to be repeatable so that you can prove that it's always this way. And it is also based on observation, on evidence, right? The reason I bring that up, the reason I mention the fact that we do ourselves a disservice in the way that we talk about science is because if you understand science as a method, understand science as a pursuit for knowledge, then it's very easy to see why it's not faith. A word that is similar to faith and that we can use synonymously some of the times is trust. And the question behind trust, which is implicit behind trust, is when is it appropriate? When is it right to trust somebody or something?
Yeah.
When you trust them, you're putting your faith in them, right?
Yes.
And so I have to tell my children sometimes, trust me, this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
I have to tell my wife, trust me, we can do this. And they put their faith in me by trusting me. Yeah. In the same way that I put my faith in other people, members of my department, other colleagues across campus, other colleagues at other institutions. I have to put faith in them. I have to trust them to do whatever their side of the deal is, right? Working on a project together, they do this, I do that. I have to trust them, they have to trust me. This is the foundation of faith. Faith in God, faith in Jesus Christ as our Savior, and St. Paul was very clear about this, you can't break it down into observable facts, right? Eventually, you have to put your trust in God first without evidence.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty with faith. You have to put your trust in God without knowing for sure that he's there. And most people's crises of faith revolve around the idea that they can't know whether God truly exists.
Yeah.
But when you think of it in that way, it's very easy to see the distinction. It's also very easy to see how scientists are often more faithful, maybe not to God, but to other things, than they like to give themselves credit for.
Mm.
That they're trusting that the machine is working properly and giving them right results.
Yeah.
They are trusting that the other people around them are going to do their jobs. They're trusting in the veracity of the theories that they're using in order to reach their own conclusions. Faith is at the basis of what a lot of people do on a regular basis, and they're putting their trust in those institutions, people, knowledge, almost without thought. And when you realize that about oneself and the people around you, you realize that faith is actually a big part of everybody's life.
Yeah.
The distinction comes between people who are willing to put faith in other people and institutions, and people who are willing to let go and put their faith in a God that there is no direct evidence for.
Mm.
And that's true faith. True faith is being able to say that without knowing, without science, without knowledge, right? Mm. I am still going to say that I have faith in this God.
Yeah. I like how you said that. And your reference to, I'm going to take the best example for me was kind of like your kids, because that's the clear like father-child imagery that we have with our Heavenly Father. So when we trust or have faith in our Heavenly Father, I feel like there's sometimes a temptation. I don't have this fully worked out either, so maybe you can answer for me, but there's this temptation of like things need to first be in line for us to then take that quote unquote leap of faith. So with what we can prove, and I guess this is the Thomistic argument of Aquinas, where it's we have our reason insofar as they get us to a point to where then the leap of faith is not as large. And I imagine that I know I've seen it. I've seen you walk into Mass with them and how you've treated your kids. If you treat them with that respect, that's worthy of them honoring you and taking that leap and trust in you. Do you find that science is kind of that in terms of your faith life, or would you say that's something else?
I'm not sure I understand the question yet.
So I think the leap of faith that people often say, or like this trusting, even if there's nothing to prove it, oftentimes comes after a series of small little facts that have been proven. So for example, with your kids, they're able to trust you because of the small little facts of you being a worthwhile father to trust throughout all the years of their formation.
Right.
So have you found that science has been those little causes for you in order to eventually take that leap of faith towards God?
Oh, I see. Was science a jumping off point for my faith?
Yes.
No, exactly the opposite. I am principally a man of faith. Okay. And what my whole experience is going through college and questioning things taught me is that my faith in God is absolute, whatever its source is. And it's true that science does progress by means of understanding things and then being able to take it for granted, right? Trusting that and then moving from that point. And so you have trust in the system, the scientific method, because it always works so methodically. It's always provable based on something lower down and more foundational. But even in science, there is a base at which you have to take it on faith that this must be true. These are the basic posits. And the things that are so foundational. They're, I begin my optics class with my physics majors by saying, okay, we're going to take this for granted. Everything follows from there. And when we take those posits for granted, what we call the principles, The principle is sort of proven by the fact that we can derive so much obviously true physical meaning from that first principle. In our own faith in God, God is that first principle. And so you're right, it does require us to take a leap of faith first, but not without reason. You mentioned my children. So my children do know me and therefore can trust me. And the difficulty is to be able to say by analogy, therefore I have faith in God the Father, right? To pray to God in the way that Jesus taught us. The difficulty being that we don't have any direct evidence that he's the one responsible for our lives, for the good and the bad things that have happened to us. And so that is why the story of Job is so important as a lesson in faith, because it's not about what's good and what's bad. It's not about whether you're in pain or whether you're not. It's about the fact that you are created and you must have faith.
Yeah.
Which is the hardest thing in the world because, as you know, so many people suffer or are treated unfairly by their fellow human beings, and their conclusion is there can't possibly be a loving God behind that.
Yes, absolutely. So being a principled man of faith and having any means you're going to have your faith. Like there's no way that science is going to basically leap that forward or contradict that. So I know earlier you mentioned that in your earlier studies when you were kind of grappling with the faith, that some of the, I guess probably more of the Old Testament, like the Genesis and the early creation stories, those were probably the most contradictory towards what you were learning.
Yes. Have
you come to try to reconcile those two, or do you just keep them completely separate and go, this is what I believe from a faith standpoint, this is what I believe from a science standpoint?
I've tried not to rationalize it as much as possible.
Okay.
I want to take. I put a lot of faith in a lot of texts that I read on physics and astronomy. I want to put the same faith into the Bible, but all of that faith always depends upon who wrote it and what was the purpose, a context. And one of the most important things that I learned about particularly the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, is that Torah has a lot of meanings apparently in Hebrew, but one of them is teaching.
Yeah. This
is meant to be instructional. And as you know, a story can be instructional. That doesn't mean it's literal truth. So is it true that God created the universe? Yes. The story is that he created it in 7 days. There was an order to his creation. The days is the story. It's the context that the readership, that the listeners needed in order to understand creation. It's not literally true. It doesn't have to be literally true because this book is instructional. It's not a science manual.
Exactly. I remember Father Mike Schmitz, because I listened to his Bible in the Year podcast. A lot of the Old Testament, he would go, it's all true, but it's not all literal. And right. He used it just like that. Like it's all true, but it's not all literal. And I think a lot of times Catholics get that kind of judgment of being more stern because they see our liturgy as being very solemn and reverent, when in reality, we actually take very careful time to actually come out and definitively say something. And when it comes to interpretations, especially the Old Testament, we have this freedom of how you go about interpreting it. I know there's some literalists out there, even in the Catholic Church, but then there's also those that kind of hold to that camp of it all being true, but not necessarily literal. Yeah. So that's a refreshing take, because I know a lot of times, I think I'm prone to this too, because I got really kind of on fire for the faith by taking a very intellectual approach first. And it hasn't been until fairly recently that I've kind of tried to, in hopes, get to where you're at, where it's a lot more like faith or heart driven is like what I like to say. And it's almost exhausting, especially going to class and thinking scientifically, and then going and doing my devotions, thinking scientifically, and trying to reconcile those two. And you almost kind of get burnt out because I think you're trying to serve something other than God in that moment. So I think your take is very refreshing of just kind of having that faith and encountering Christ through your prayers, through going to Mass, through continuously living a life of faith.
I think it's a good thing to remember in your position that God made you the way that you are.
Hmm.
So even if you don't understand all the pieces, but you're an analytical person, which is essentially what I think you just said.
Hmm.
Do you see yourself that way?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. You're an analytical person. There must be a good reason for that.
Yeah.
You don't know what it is. That's okay. I don't know what it is for me.
Hmm.
But I know who I am. I'm a child of God, and I know what I'm good at, what He gave me, what the gifts are. And so, whether it is being a scientist in at the telescope, whether it is being a teacher in the classroom, I am going to bring that analytical mindset,
Yeah.
and I don't see why there should be any conflict between that and the fact that I'm also putting all of my faith in God for that reason.
Yeah. So we've kind of explored that when it comes to a faith standpoint, they don't intersect as much for you. But when it comes to approach, perhaps because it's in your nature to be analytical, there's some similarities. Do you think there's similarities in, or at least influence, maybe not in how you believe or if you believe it, but similarities in the stance of how you go about in your devotions? We started the podcast with a psalm reading that had to do with stars and things of that nature. Are there moments that like your work does influence the way you maybe pray or anything like that?
Probably. I think I can. I might frame it slightly differently, which is that my
Okay.
analytical mindset is always on.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so, for instance, when I began learning about them, I took very seriously the claims of Marian apparitions.
Mm.
And I wanted to determine whether or not this made any sense.
Mm.
And I've come to the conclusion that they absolutely happened when they are confirmed. Mary appearing to Juan Diego, Saint Juan Diego, as the Virgin of Guadalupe. Mary appearing to the children at La Salette. And then again to Saint Bernadette.
Yes.
Before then, I guess, Catherine Labouré, who was responsible for the miraculous medal, as you may know.
Yes.
The children at Fatima. And since then, perhaps the most important, the ongoing apparitions at Medjugorje.
Yes.
All of these I have proved to myself by means of contextual analysis that they are happening or have happened. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most helpful things to me was reading Sister Lucia's accounts of the apparitions at Fatima in her own words.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very grateful that she was asked to do this and that she took time out of her busy schedule to do so, because she has given us a firsthand account, which in its edited form, we know that not every detail is perfect, just like human memory errs. But it has the ring of truth, just in the same way that if I had a scientist who was saying, here's the data and here's the thing and this is the result, and it's a really surprising result, I would be able to say, based on his data, that either his conclusion is correct or it's not.
Mm.
And so I do that all the time. And I have a great deal of respect for my fellow scientists who draw meaningful conclusions without bias, whether it's an important result, a big result, or just a relatively mundane result, because they've gone through this process of making sure that the data actually support the assertion, not fixing the assertion to be what they want it, and then only choosing, cherry picking the data to fit.
Mm.
And so I took that same mindset that I learned by being a master's and PhD student in the sciences to the Marian apparitions. And I came to the conclusion first that the Fatima apparitions were absolutely real. One of the main reasons for that is that these three children were so obviously not pulling anybody's leg. They had no benefit to doing this, and they were serious children. That it was obvious to me that they didn't see themselves as lying in any way.
Mm.
And then to hear the whole account to hear the things that were prophesied by Mary, and how they came about. All of that was substantiating evidence.
Yeah.
And it substantiated the claim that Mary really was appearing to people, and that she had done so on numerous occasions. And if that's true, okay, now I take that for granted. It's time to listen to the messages.
Yeah.
And so I take the messages that Mary shared, starting back in Mexico City 400 years ago, right? 500 years ago. It is almost 500 years ago. Can you believe it?
Wow.
To France, to Portugal. I take these messages seriously because I know that they represent what really happened. And that
Wow.
goes for Medjugorje now. I know that some people are, questioning this right now. I've read enough of her messages from Medjugorje. It was just purely exploratory. Is this real or not? And I've come to the conclusion that this is very in line with Fatima. In fact, it almost feels like a continuation of the same thing. And for such a long, extended period of time, this is very unlikely to be a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because I'm trying to reconcile this idea that we discussed earlier of not being able to prove the faith with any observable facts, but yet also taking the analytical approach to the faith. And I guess the difference would be that these aren't necessarily observable facts on behalf of you, but rather just an approach and an acceptance of things that I guess aren't observable. And that's kind of the way that you're going about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get into this a little bit. I had one opportunity to go up into the telescope or the observatory at Austin College, and you were in there. I don't think we had even known each other at the time. I was a freshman, and there was like a night that was being hosted. I get up there, and it could have just been the fact that it was novel for me and for many others, but there seemed to be a level of like almost sacred silence when you entered into the observatory. And even when we stepped outside and we're looking at the stars, I think there was kind of a hush, which you don't typically see in a college campus. You don't typically see with people my age. We're constantly being filled with noise and of that, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Could you attribute that to anything other than just the fact that I guess we were trying to be respectful? Or why were we trying to be respectful? Perhaps because college students aren't always that respectful.
Oh, sure. There is something awe-inspiring about the universe. Mm-hmm. And if you get the opportunity to look through a little eyepiece and begin to see that vastness for yourself, 9 times out of 10, people will experience that awe. Mm-hmm. I remember one student who was filled with fear at that awe and ran away, essentially.
Oh, wow.
And I respect that. I've had mostly students who get really excited about it and want to be part of it, and so they help out at the observatory at these nights. I've had others that just visit, and that one meaningful experience was all they need, and they come back as alumni and they tell me how much it meant to them to go to the observatory.
Yeah.
And so it is a sneak peek at something bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah.
Bigger than everything that we do on a daily basis. The argument that you had today, the things that you were concerned about, the worries that you had about what, this person said or that person might have thought, it all just vanishes into just microscopy compared to what it is that you are beholding now.
Yes.
And so the daily life, it's an opportunity for daily life to just, be put into the background so that you can see the context for what you are. And physically, we're not much.
No.
So, all the more amazing, therefore, in Psalm 8, when we're described as little lower than the angels. That sense of awe that was described by the psalmist in Psalm 8, that who are we that God should pay any attention to us? We're so tiny. They knew that back then, 3,000 years ago, and we know it today when we visit the observatory, when we have this opportunity to unplug from the everyday. And I would say that that's a really important experience that I continue to want to share with people so that they have that knowledge. Because for some people, it's the first time that they've ever had that experience to think about something outside of their own lives.
Absolutely. And that just speaks to a similar experience I think people feel or should feel going into a mass, is that finitude, the smallness of who they are in relation to the Creator. And I think that's kind of what I was feeling in that moment. It was at night too. I think I probably finished saying my rosary right before I went.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say, as alumni of only 1 year, I appreciate that experience.
Awesome.
So I'm one of those in that camp.
Yeah. Well, you're always welcome back.
I remember, and it was a speech that was during kind of a sad time, so I'll leave that out of context. But you were giving a speech and did very well on it. But you mentioned that they employ astronomers at the Vatican. Am I correct in that?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think the interest with the Catholic Church and perhaps the stars or science is?
So I was wondering in the notes where you got that from, and it was Kim Snipes' memorial service.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't know that until you just said that. So, okay, now I understand the context.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, the Vatican has employed astronomers for quite a long time. There are two main places. There is an observatory near Rome where some of them are based, but a number of them are also based here in the United States. At Stewart Observatory in Tucson, Arizona. It's part of the University of Arizona, but it's its own separate institution. And they operate a telescope on Mount Graham in Arizona. It's called the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, VAT, V-A-T-T. So yeah, I know a couple people who've used that telescope. What does it say? I would say that, and this is echoed with so many of my relationships with Catholic friends. I think as Catholics, we really respect what it is that humans can learn by themselves. Not as a revealed truth that we would have to take on faith, right? Something like, for instance, Mary telling us something at Medjugorje, that's a revealed truth. But something that we could discover for ourselves. And, God gave us these minds, right? He gave you your analytical mind. He gave us what we have. And so what we are able to get under our own steam, I think, is something that we in the Catholic Church take with a great deal of respect. And that's cool.
Yeah.
The fact that we want to learn more about the world around us. The fact that the largest meteorite collection, or maybe the second largest meteorite collection in the world, is owned by the Vatican. Did you know that?
I'd not.
The Vatican loves space rocks, dude. But this is
awesome.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because it shows the level of dedication to understanding and learning. You might also know that the man behind the Big Bang theory was a Jesuit priest.
Yes.
There are many scientific discoveries, not just in astronomy, that were conducted by members of the Catholic clergy. And so there is, I think, in the same way that I used my analytical skills in order to understand the Marian apparitions, other people have used their analytical skills both in the sciences, but also, for instance, maybe contextual analysis of the Bible. And understanding, the truth behind their faith, and understanding the historical context in which it was being told. All of this had to be done by scientifically minded, analytical people. Yeah. And so, in that way, I don't view the sciences as just the natural sciences. It's a mindset, right? It's a way of doing things. It's a method. And so I
love the way you speak of that, because it puts it in the form of a vocation as similar as all the other vocations. Because I know there's some people that are really called to kind of like more of a monastic life that are very contemplative, and some people that are in a monastic life have PhDs and then they join the monastic life. So not saying that they're not analytical, but like kind of this different approach to the faiths and how they're all valid integrations or valid ways of exploring the truth, which is God. And
Absolutely.
I like the way you speak on that.
Can there be
I
a
know you're
bad
busy.
way of exploring God? I mean, that's just maybe an open question to think about.
What was that?
Is it possible that there is a bad way to explore God?
I guess outside of the church.
Maybe, but maybe not, right? What if someone's never had experience with the church? How could that be bad?
True. I know in the Nostra Aetate, which is in the Second Vatican Council, I mean, it's I guess amongst some sedevacantists who are against Vatican II, there's this idea that it's not valid, but I don't hold to that. I obviously believe it's valid.
Yeah.
There's the idea that there is truth outside of the church, but it's just not the fullness of the truth, and that we should commend those elements that are truthful of other things. So as long as it leads home, I guess it would be a valid exploration.
I think I've seen that played out in a lot of Catholic lives. For instance, a number of my college friends, for instance, who were Catholic and expressed a great deal of respect for me for what I was doing to study physics and astronomy, something that came naturally to me, but it meant something to them that someone was not only willing to, but able to explore those things on their own. And at the time I was like, I'm not special. Like this feels weird that, you're showing so much respect for me for something that just comes naturally, but I think I understand it now. And I certainly understand it with respect to what you're saying, which is that if we do respect as a church, the pursuit of knowledge, then you're right. It doesn't matter where the truth comes from. From my Catholic friend's point of view, it was okay that an Episcopalian was learning this stuff, right? It didn't matter because the fact was that I was a child of God who was doing this thing, and that was awe-inspiring for them, and that's cool.
So if we consider that the pursuit of knowledge or the pursuit of truth is getting us closer to God, how do we risk not having that same pride that was inherent in the Tower of Babel, where they were trying to build themselves up towards the heavens?
Yeah. This is true for a lot of academics. I don't know the exact cause of a lot of it. In your notes, you mentioned how you sometimes feel that way too, right? That pride can take over. And there is certainly, I think, learning about the vastness of the space, you can feel like, aha, I understand this great big thing.
Yes.
Something that is physically much larger than myself and has so many incorporated parts, including all of these other people.
Yes.
When I see it displayed at its worst, it seems to me like it's mostly based in control over other people. And when I see that, I try to steer away from it. It is certainly something that is worrying.
Yeah.
I think, that sense of awe that you felt at the observatory, being reminded how small we are, and that can come in a few different ways. Looking through a telescope is an obvious one. You can see yourself as physically small.
Yeah.
But for me in my work, the constant refrain is to remind myself of what it is that I don't yet know, and some things that seem maybe impossible to know. And constantly understanding the limits of my knowledge in this way. Those are the humbling thoughts that I think I rely on in order not to become that prideful person that I know I'm capable of being and have been in the past.
Yeah. And you're right. In the notes I did mention, this was a question mainly to be scrutinizing of myself, because this is things I felt.
Yeah.
I work with trying to interpret people and analyze them. So the mind being complex and people not typically understanding, being a student of the mind, you kind of sometimes have this pride of like, oh, I'm able to understand something that many people aren't able to understand.
Yeah.
I guess the awe or the humility factor that comes into play is that I also sit across from enough people that tell me stories about the lives that they've lived, and it shows me just how very little I understand. You can try on a textbook to map their thoughts, to map the next the things they say in a session or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, their life lived is as their own, and it makes you truly humble of what they've gone through.
Yeah.
And I'm honored and blessed to have heard the stories of a few people, even though I haven't fully got into the practice of providing therapy yet.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. We do have a rapid fire round in the
Okay.
podcast that I've integrated. But before we do that, is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners about faith, astronomy, maybe the integration of it, anything that I haven't mentioned that you'd kind of want to bring up?
Maybe a couple of things, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the questions that stuck out to me was, and I know how many of your friends are still college students, so this feels like a pertinent question. Your question on the forum was, what advice would you give to young Catholics discerning a vocation to the sciences?
Mm-hmm.
And my honest advice is maybe the simplest, which is just simply to study what it is that you have questions about. That will lead you on the right path. That will lead you on the path towards making those right decisions. There was no reason why astronomy should have been the field of study for me. It was, if you look at it in one way, a great deal of good luck that my college professor recommended physics to me. And it was at a time when I really didn't know what I wanted out of my college experience or what direction I was going in life. And so I seized on the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I seized on the opportunity because I was really curious to learn more. You know, as I said, when I went to her, I said, yeah, I would like to do physics, but I really want to study astronomy. If she hadn't opened that door to me, it wouldn't have been, possible for me to explore that. And so for people who are in the position of actually the door is open, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Go in the direction that just makes the most sense.
And not, I would assume, and not be afraid to course correct if it happens not to be at the time. I'm sure that I'm this way, especially if I do something, I feel I have to stick it through completely and forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was even getting some anxiety from the story of you being a sophomore after finishing 2 semesters, switching your major, and I'm like, oh, I could never do that. But it ended up working out, and I did something similar. Although my major didn't change, I just dropped pre-med studies, which was hard enough as it was too, because it wasn't for like grade reasons. It was simply vocational, of like me not wanting to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be, if I was a listener, I would just say not to be afraid to course correct if God kind of pulls you in that direction.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. And then there was this question in closing of, is there anything, if someone leaves this conversation with one insight about faith in the cosmos, what would you hope it to be? And I had 2 main thoughts, actually, that I think I'd like to share. Okay. And one of those is for those listeners, yourself included, who possess faith. When you have faith, treasure it, because it's a gift from God. And that's an important thing to remember. But for absolutely everybody, and I don't imagine many atheists will find your podcast, but maybe there will be one. There's no problem.
God willing, that'd be great.
Well, maybe. And what I would have to say to absolutely anybody, and they don't have to be Catholic, they don't have to be a person of faith even, which is just live your life honestly. You have to listen to your conscience in all things. And if you're listening to your conscience in all things, the path will be obvious for you. And I think we would all be better off if we lived our lives honestly in this way. And so that's my general advice. And I hope the thing that comes across to people.
Absolutely.
In conclusion.
Those are wonderful pieces of advice, and ones that I can use and reflect on myself. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to have gotten a lot of this advice that goes to the audience is also going to me, which I've been thankful for. So, I guess there is one other question that popped into my mind again after you answering the question about students, and that is, if there is an educator, whether that's a professor, a school teacher, or perhaps just a parent homeschooling their kid, because I know there's a few of those that listen to the podcast, what would you tell them for how the student should pursue truth without fear of faith and reason?
I think it boils down to the same thing that I've already said, which is, pursue the questions that interest you.
Okay.
And so that's good advice for a teacher as well. Homeschooling teacher, doesn't matter if it's a classroom teacher either. If you have a question and you want to find the answer to it, do so. There's no harm in doing so. Sure, there are certain things that you just have to learn, right? There's certain facts that should be known in a general education. Absolutely stick to those. But if there's a particular area that really, really interests you, maybe there's a teacher who's really interested in learning more about, basic chemistry, and that there's one chemistry experiment that they've always wanted to do. Why not try it, right? What harm could you possibly do by trying? And so, yes, follow the questions where they lead.
Awesome. All right, so are you ready for the rapid fire round, or is there something else?
Those were the two things that I really wanted to talk about.
I'm glad. I'm glad you talked about it.
Good.
I told you off screen that as soon as I did this podcast, even before the first episode, I made a list of people that I knew I was going to reach out to, and you were one of them. So I had a large list of questions I want to ask you. So
okay,
I'm glad we were able to get through the amount that we did.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're probably a little worried, like, oh no, this is a lot.
No, don't worry.
But we're going to get to the rapid fire round. I start the timer after the first question. No one has yet got it under a minute.
Okay.
So there's no worries if you do.
Okay.
But you would be the first. So you can bring bragging rights home if you do.
I'm not very good. Go ahead.
So I'll start right after you start answering the first question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Who is your favorite saint? And if you had one day to spend with him or her, what would you ask or do?
So that would be my confirmation saint, St. Wolfston. And awesome. I would spend my day in contemplative prayer with him.
What is your most controversial take on the Catholic topic?
Hard to say. And I think this is speaking mostly to my fellow Catholics who are a little bit more hard-nosed. There's no such thing as a wrong Christian denominations. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ.
Okay. You have just been elected Pope. What is your first move?
I knew exactly what I would do. I would declare a year of mourning for the poor. And that would be the first step.
Favorite religious order and why?
No answer to that.
Okay. What single virtue would you want to be remembered by?
Probably the one that I struggle with most, or one of the ones that I struggle with most, which is humility.
Fantastic. You are the first participant to be under a minute, 51 seconds.
I was not trying.
Well, I want to give you a little bit more time to explain one of the questions,
sure,
which was a year of mourning for the poor. I love that. As Catholics, we have the preferential option for the poor. That's a cause near and dear to my heart. I don't know, maybe just expand on that. I want to leave you up to kind of discuss that a little bit.
Be happy to. Well, so my first joke answer to that question, you've just been elected Pope, what's your first move? My first answer was to find someone more qualified to take over. But I was looking at, we have a bit of a crisis in the United States right now. It's a living crisis, right? People are finding it much more difficult than they used to live paycheck to paycheck. And this is obvious if you're willing to look for it. Meaning there are people in your community for whom this is true. And it's our joint responsibility to care for the poor. And the fact that we don't is a stain on us as Christians. Even if we do care for the poor, I mean, even Jesus was, you always have the poor. You can take care of them whenever you want, right? When he was talking about the woman who anointed him, right? If you really read that, that's like saying you don't do enough, right?
Yeah.
You've always got this problem, and you get to choose whether or not you want to deal with it. And so I take that seriously, and I think one of the only ways to really deal with the crisis of poverty in the world, but also specifically in our own communities, is to take responsibility for it. And the only way we can take responsibility for it is to owning up to our responsibility for it. And the way that starts is by mourning for what we have done in order to perpetuate poverty, especially for those who are mentally ill. And when we own our responsibility for that, then we have the opportunity to finally actually do something more.
So what would that year of more? And the reason I ask this question is because if a listener had to go do something, because we're not the Pope, and we don't have a year of mourning right now, but what would that year of mourning look like? And I guess on a small scale, what can we do as listeners to mourn for the poor?
Well, I think this is about, like I said, taking responsibility. And so it begins with prayer. It begins with prayerfully reflecting on the ways that we have not helped the poor when we had the opportunity to. It takes the form of praying for God's forgiveness for having neglected the poor, for not having seen Jesus in the poor man, or the widow or the orphan, and deciding not to care for them. That's what mourning looks like, I think. I had a follow-on to that, which you might be interested in, which is that after the year of mourning, I would call a crusade. I would call a crusade against despair and hopelessness.
Oh, wow.
And so essentially I would be waging spiritual battle on the causes of perpetual poverty. Because it is so easy for someone who is experiencing homelessness or has been told no time out of mind and stopped asking because they know what the answer is going to be, to fall into despair, to fall into drugs, alcohol, sex. And they do all of these things which we know are bad for them, and we tell them not to do the things, but we don't give them any opportunity to get out of it. That's where we failed. And the only way to deal with it is to put on our armor and go into the community and help the people.
That's amazing. Dr. Whelan, I send this to every single guest that I talk to, and it's this idea that while I invite theological discussions and scholarly discussions on the Bible, the main focus of this podcast is seeing the joy of the life of the faithful. And I've now done a few of these with a vast array of different people with different vocations, and the joy that they exude is all different. And because you are analytical and a scientist, I think there's a level of seriousness in which you conduct yourself, but even in that seriousness, I think this answer conveyed it perfectly by calling the Crusades, for example. It's still very clear and evident of the joy that living out the faith brings to your life and how it affects those that witness you live it. So I thank you time and time again of coming on this podcast. It was phenomenal. And I would just ask if you're willing to close us off in prayer.
Yes. In the words of Saint Faustina, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.